will given by Dr. Valsamis Ntouskos. Hope I pronounced correctly. And just a very brief introduction of the Dr. Ntouskos. He got his bachelor from the Greece University, National Technical University of the Athens, and then he got his master and PhD degree from Sapienza University of Rome in Italy. So since then, after that, he did a few years researcher at the same department in Sapienza, and from 2022, I think he got a research fellow, Mercury research fellow, and has working at the lab called Remote Sensing Lab at the National Technical University of Athens, where he got his bachelor, and he has been like a pioneer or researcher in the field, published several publications in top-tier international conference and journals, and in the field of the machine learning and computer vision. And he also do the teaching and research interests include computer vision, remote sensing, machine learning, and robotics, with a focus on the design and development of the autonomous perception and non-conventional image systems. So yeah, so now let's welcome Dr. Ntouskos to give our presentation on the AI for intelligent sensing and analysis of underwater environments. Yeah, stage yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Wang, for the kind introduction, and thank you Brunel University and this series for inviting me, and especially Dr. Nadine Burman. So today I will be talking about AI for intelligent sensing and analysis in underwater environments. Of course, for starting, I should mention that this is work done by our research group, whose Professor Konstantinos Karantos is the leading, and they have a very good collaborators working on these topics. And also, most of this work is in the context of national and international research projects, in which we were collaborating with small and medium enterprises in Europe and other research institutes and universities around Europe, like the ones you see here. So before starting with the research work, I would like to give some context, because most of the topics I will be talking about are in the context of environmental intelligence. So environmental intelligence is a relatively new research field, so a precise definition is still being formed. But according to University of Exeter, that is one of the first research body that has performed research work on this topic. Environmental intelligence is the integration of environmental and sustainability research with data science, robotics, and artificial intelligence and other cutting-edge technologies. And as you can see already by this definition, it's a multidisciplinary area of research that whose goal is to provide some insight to citizens, individuals, businesses, and policymakers in order to address the challenges which are associated with environmental change. And in this context, it requires collaborative research between mathematics, computer science, engineering, and many other research fields. So environmental intelligence brings together data streams from all around the globe, and from different environments: ground, air, space, the sea, which we will see today, and also living organisms, satellites, and other citizen sources, together with hardware and software systems and analytical technology that it's employed by human reasoning and machine learning, which we will see today. And the goal is to better understand and manage the environment. All in all, AI, environmental intelligence is not just about the measurements and the analysis of the processing of the data, but it's also about getting the right information to the right people at the right time in order to support decision making. So in this regard, regarding the research work that is done in this context of environmental intelligence, it regards the development and of tools and methodologies for modeling, analyzing, and predicting socio-environmental evolution. So it comprises spatial intelligence, geospatial big data analytics, decision support systems, and so on. And also the design, development, and of novel sensors and technologies for for taking data and making in situ monitoring using robotic vehicles, so like airborne and underwater robotic vehicles, miniaturized robots, mass sensors, and many other similar technologies. And the targets critical resources like water, air, soil, crops, and so on, and also living organisms, also biodiversity and the entire ecosystem. So you understand it by this brief introduction on environmental intelligence that it's crucial for targeting also the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, and many of them. And in this talk, although I will focus on this specific goals on 13 and 14, so climate action and life below water. So the work you will see are mostly relevant with this specific sustainable development goals. So the work I will present is about environmental intelligence in the water. So the thing is that underwater environments pose significant challenges, and it's a bit strange because 70% of the Earth's surface is covered by water, and despite this, only 5% of the oceans has been explored. So 95% is it's still unexplored. So in some aspects, this is because of difficulties in accessibility inside the water, and also in other difficulties regarding how information is collected, because electromagnetic radiation is not so well transmitted inside the water, and one has to go very close to take data, visual data, although there are other modalities like acoustic data, which we'll briefly discuss in a moment, that are used also to collect information. So in some aspects, it's more difficult to explore the oceans than the space. So there are similarities, and also there are analogies between doing research inside the water and doing research in space. And each field has its own particular challenges. And you understand that doing research inside the water requires a multidisciplinary approach and a lot of practical expertise from the engineering field. So you need partners that are very well prepared to perform these missions, and you need a lot of equipment in order to be able to perform research in underwater environment. Nevertheless, it's very important to study the underwater environment and the oceans, because there's enormous economic and scientific interest in its exploration. So let me dive directly into the topics I will present today. So the first topic I would like to talk about is the underwater radiation mapping. So to give some context, we have a very good understanding of how radioactivity, the levels of radioactivity on the surface of the Earth. And so there are several monitoring stations around the globe that, among other parameters of the quality of air and so on, also the radioactivity levels in some stations is monitored. So we know at each time what are the radioactivity levels, and if there is something we should that should alarm us or not. The same thing it's not happening for the water. So there have been some works that in some research projects that studied radioactivity in the water, but mostly very close to the surface, and in relation also to some specific events like the event of Fukushima, and that it's a notable example. So the project, we have proposed this project, which is called Ramons. It's a project, European Horizon 2020 project, FED Proactive, that is already has concluded 3 years, and it's in the last year of being implemented. And the objective of the project is to try to build radioactivity mapping inside the sea, not only on the surface, but in the entire water column. And to do this, we have proposed to have a fleet of underwater robots, some special kind of robots, which I will describe in a bit, which are called gliders, that have the possibility that are able to go inside the water for many, many days, weeks, even months. And this is crucial in order to be able to cover very large distances. So these robotic vehicles carry special detectors that can measure radioactivity inside the water. Besides this, the project predicts the use of some instruments that are placed in special positions in the sea bottom. And these instruments can offer also radioactivity imaging and also more precise measurements for radioactivity in order to have a very good estimation of radioactivity levels at specific locations of interest. And just to give you an idea, when we talk about radioactivity, we don't only talk about anthropogenic radioactivity, like in the case of radioactive waste that has been disposed in the water, or some accident, like in the case of Fukushima, where quantities of radioactive material end in the water. But there is very large interest in natural radioactivity, like the ones that is emitted in tectonic events or in underwater volcanoes, and I will talk more about it in the course of this talk. So the thing is that there's a very large difference between monitoring and mapping radioactivity in the air than doing this in the water. And this table tries to give a very rough idea of why is this. Essentially, the thing is that radioactivity interacts with the molecules of the water, and it's stopped at a distance which it's about 1 meter. So in the air, you see that you have a very small stopping of radioactivity, shielding of radioactivity, as called, and you can measure some radioactive source. You can sense it from tens or hundreds of meters, while in the water, even for very high radioactivity levels, it's very difficult to detect it above 1 or 2 meters. And this is a serious challenge. So in order to address this, we need to have equipment and vehicles that can be in the water for extended periods of time and take measurements continuously. And also, it's important to have more than one vehicle, the more the better, so they can cover the area more efficiently, and not only, but they can also pass from the same area multiple times and have a very good estimate of the radioactivity distribution in the area. So this is the reason that we have selected to work with the underwater glider vehicles, which have some serious, very important advantages. And some of this is that they have ultra low energy consumption because they use their buoyancy as a motor, essentially, in order to move in the water. And you will see this in a couple of minutes. And based on this, they can cover very long distances and can operate for days or weeks. So these type of vehicles have crossed the Atlantic multiple times in other research works, and they have collected the data for hurricanes, for the melting of ice, and very important scientific discoveries based on their ability to work in the water for many days or weeks. For our purposes, there are also some challenges, and some of these that have a low speed. So because they move by using gravity buoyancy, they can move up to 2 kilometers per hour. They can also not stop, so they have to be in motion that's the way they operate. And also there's some considerations about the payload area and how these are prepared for the mission that needs special care, as you will see in a moment. So typically, these vehicles arrive at a pitch angle of minus 25 to 25 degrees. And this is the angle between the horizontal axis and the vehicle main axis. And as I said before, essentially they use very small power to move the center of gravity of the vehicle and change its buoyancy. So they, for some period, they are diving, so they are gliding in the water and going towards the seabed, and then they change again the buoyancy and the center of mass, and they start climbing until they reach a certain altitude, and they start again this loop. So they perform this yo-yo motion, as it's called typically, but they also have a rudder, and they can steer, and they can also perform helicoidal movements, which is a typical motion these vehicles can perform. So for the purposes of our work and for radioactivity mapping, we had to heavily modify these vehicles and introduce some enhancements in order to be able to control them more efficiently and more effectively. So these enhancements are the addition of acoustics. So we have added some USBL transceiver on the top and a USBL transducer on the bottom. And these have a dual purpose. First of which is to have a real-time localization of the vehicles when they are in the water, which in other cases it's not possible. And also the addition of these acoustics enables us to have exchange of information, a few bytes per second, but this is enough for our purposes. So we can have a real-time report on what they are measuring in the water. The other important enhancement that has been offered by the manufacturer, but it's not a standard option, is to have access to the controls of the vehicle. So we can control the vehicle while it's performing its operations. This is not standard. So usually what happens with this vehicle is that you define a mission, some waypoints in the map, and the target depth of which you would like the vehicle to reach, and what kind of measurements should they take. And then the vehicles perform these motions autonomously. So they do what they try to reach the waypoint the user has assigned, and at some point which has been defined, they go to the surface and transmit all the data they have collected via satellite to the control station, and they continue their path. This was not enough for our purposes, also because of the very short distances that radioactivity should be associated with a location, as we have seen before. So we have we have done these enhancements in order to be able to change how these vehicles typically operate and have a real-time control and monitoring of what they are gathering. And of course, in order to take the radioactivity measurements, we have added a detector that is specially built in order to measure gamma activity. So, oops, sorry. So this is some videos from the preparation of the vehicles. So they need to be, because they are based on buoyancy, they have to be very finely adjusted so that they perform the movements without having the risk of not going to the surface, and of course not be able to dive. But the first is most important, so you can recover the vehicle. So even though these vehicles weigh about 70 kilograms in the water, they should weigh almost zero. essentially they should have some buoyancy of 50 to 100 grams. So you have guarantees that they will come up eventually. And this is there's some long processes in order to guarantee this in the water. And these are some examples. This is an example of deploying the vehicle in one of the tests we have performed in Portugal last September, where we tested the fully developed vehicle with all the enhancements and extensions I have mentioned before in a dam, which is a controlled, let's say, space. We know that the vehicle will not escape. And we had very satisfactory results on what in testing these modifications we have done. So this is about the vehicles. Now the question is how to build online maps of radioactivity in the sea. So as I mentioned before, we have some specially built detectors, which are based on a commercial gamma detector that has been put in a special housing that protects it from the water, and it sustains depths up to 1,000 meters. And can be interfaced to different kind of vehicles like this small mini ROV you see here, or the full glider vehicle I've shown before that we have developed. So data are collected on board from these vehicles, and then based using the acoustics, they are transmitted to another vehicle on the surface, which also has low energy consumption. We have used this sail drone from Roxy Annie from Gran Canarias, which is specially also customized in order to collect data about radioactivity and also gather all the data transmitted from the glider so it can build the map of radioactivity. Because we didn't have the vehicles at the beginning of the project, of course, and they are now ready to be used for the first trials, we had to get an idea of what we would expect to measure when the vehicles would be deployed. And not only this, but to have an idea also of what is the order of magnitude of time they would need to scan a certain area, and also what percentage of the volume they would be able to measure. So we have built a high-level simulation environment for radioactivity mapping, where we can study the continuous long-term radioactivity monitoring and simulate measurements from 2 or more gliders, and by considering different type of glider trajectories, as I discussed before, so the yo-yo movements or the helicoidal movements, and have also in this way trade-offs between what is the trajectory type and the reconstruction accuracy and the time required to do the mapping. And based on this, we have developed some novel mapping algorithms I will talk about in a minute. So essentially, we have this 3D environment where the user defines what is the type of trajectory the glider will perform to scan the area. And based on this data, the simulation produces some log file, so the measurements that the gliders would collect while traversing this volume. And using these measurements, simulated measurements, we can study what is the best way to have a reconstruction of the radioactivity distribution in the area, by considering different radioactivity distributions we would expect to have or we would like to measure in the sea. So these are some results from these simulations, and you can see the difference between the time and the total distance traveled by the vehicles when the type of trajectory is changing between yo-yo movement and helical movement. And this is for different spacings between how close the glider passes when it goes from one direction to the other and then returns back, or in the case of the helicoidal movement, how big are the voxels in which the glider is performing the helicoidal movement. And there are some important differences. But what is striking is that considering that, as I said before, the measurements of radioactivity refer to, let's say, a volume of, let's say, a sphere around the detector of radius about 1 meter. The percentage of the volume that is covered by these movements is very, very small. So this is a percentage, so it's 0.02%. So even by scanning with a very tight spacing the volume, you have a very sparse sampling of an undersampled volume of study. So the problem is how to deal with this problem and fill the gaps, so what you don't know, in a meaningful way. So to introduce what we have proposed, I will take a small detour and talk about neural radiance fields, because our idea was based on neural radiance fields. So neural radiance fields were proposed by Mildenhall and Toll et al. In 2020. And it has revolutionized the field of synthetic rendering from this time on until today. It's a very active field of research. And the idea is that essentially you use a neural network to capture the 3D scene. So you would like to have a function, to learn some function that, given a position in space and the viewing direction, so a specific point in space when viewed from a specific azimuth and elevation angle, you have this function that returns what is the color of the 3D scene, this position with this direction, and also an estimation of the density or the opacity of what is there at the specific point. So it can, in this way, it can cover also the transparency and the blend of colors when you have transparent materials and so on. So the idea is in principle quite simple. So you would like to train a network. You have some images taken around a specific object. And so for these images, you know what is the output of so the color, and you can estimate also the density with some techniques given some specific position. And you learn this function by using a neural network. In the original work, a 10-layer, a hidden 10 hidden layer network, and by learning this function, you can create an image, a synthetic image, from a viewpoint that's not has been collected in the dataset, in the original dataset. So you can define a new position in space and a new viewing direction, and render a new image. So it's easier to show it in a video than explain it. So these images are synthetically generated. So it is defined the motion of the camera, and the rendering is done by using this function that is learned by the neural network, and the same for this example. So they're very, very realistic, and they capture very well the details of the objects and the reflections and so on. And if you have enough data around an object, you can perform the full circle around the object and render it from any viewpoint. An important issue in this aspect regards what is the input, the dimensionality of the input with respect to the frequency content of the scene or the image, because you can do the same for the image. So you can learn a function that encodes an image. So for every X and Y position of the image, you can ask what is the color. So essentially learn a neural network that represents an image. The problem is that if you try this in naively, so you just provide X and Y as input to a network, you will get something that is not very satisfying. So you will get an image like this, or a 3D structure like this, and so on. And this has been studied, and it has been proposed that Fourier features can solve this problem. So in order to solve this problem, you have to increase artificially the dimensionality of the inputs. So one of the ways to do this is via Fourier features. So these are two possibilities using positional encoding and Gaussian features. So this V vector is the X and Y. It's based on this encoding. Its dimensionality is increased based on some parameter M that is selected. It's a hyperparameter selected by the user. So you see the difference you have when no Fourier features are considered when you try to learn this specific image. So to train a neural network that approximates this image. And the difference when you use Gaussian Fourier features, it's quite striking. So in order to solve our problem of interpolating the radioactivity distribution in the 3D space, we followed a similar idea based on NERF. There is the neural networks have this property of being good interpolators, and we built on this and proposed to use a multi-layer perceptron, a neural network, a fully connected neural network, which given the position XYZ in the volume of interest, would give us back the radioactivity level that is estimated. So we have proposed this method, which is more memory and time efficient with respect to linear interpolation, because we talk here for that these volumes are very, very large, and if they are discretized at the fine with a fine spatial resolution, it becomes unmanageable in terms of memory and time. But neural networks can handle this better because they're also massively parallelizable. And we have found that they also have increased accuracy in the final reconstruction. So in order to test this, of course, we didn't test with real data, but we have to consider data from simulations. So both considering analytical signals distributed in the 3D space, but also some cases which are closer to what we are interested in. So it's trying to simulate hydrothermal vents based on fixed law of diffusion, so having some radioactivity in some specific point in the middle of the area, which is diffused in time, and also some geometrical representation of these hydrothermal vents, like inverse cone, which is a very crude representation of how you expect that radioactivity is diffused in the space. So this is just an image of how it's the real image from a hydrothermal vent that deploys material, some of which of the particles in which are radioactive. Just to give you an idea why this can be considered a crude model of this distribution. And we have noticed in the results that based in comparison with some typical implementation of linear interpolation in well-known libraries, we were able to increase our accuracy in almost all cases. And it's also interesting to see that what happens when no Fourier features are considered, that there is a very large difference on the reconstruction accuracy, that it's worse than linear interpolation. So this was about mapping of radioactivity using robotic vehicles. But as I have mentioned in the beginning, another topic of interest is radioactivity imaging. So how to have images of where radioactivity is in the close proximity of the sensor. So for this, already in the open air applications, there have been proposed some special devices that are able to overlay radioactivity hotspots in the images of the scene. And I will tell you about how some of the ways this can be achieved. So we have created some prototypes based on special detectors that have these pixelated detector modules that we built in a way that can be containerized in special housings that can be also that can also operate up to 1,000 meters depth in the water. So essentially, these detectors have these crystals, which are made of a special material that has the high probability of interacting with gamma rays. So gamma rays have a high probability of interacting with the molecules of this material of the detector and producing an electric signal. This is also the principle of what the other detectors have shown before. It's the same principle, but the difference here is that these detectors are pixelated. So you can estimate at which XY position the gamma ray interacted in the crystal. And not only, they have also a cathode, which also a signal can be measured when the event is detected. So you see here what are the raw data produced by these detector modules. You have some signal at the pixel where the event happened, and also you have a signal in the cathode, which is the difference in time between these two signals can indicate where which is the Z position in the crystal where the event happened. So this can be used. This can be used in order to have to reconstruct the image of the radioactivity. So to identify from which direction the gamma ray hit the crystal under some assumptions I will talk about in the next slide. Besides this information, you can also have a spectrogram. So to this gap, so the height of this step is analogous to the energy of the gamma ray hitting the crystal. So in this way, you can know how many gamma rays of specific energy have interacted with the detector, and this helps to identify specific radioisotopes that are present in the environment. So the way the imaging is done is based on the Compton scattering effect. So Compton scattering is one of the ways that gamma rays interact with matter. Essentially, the gamma ray hits some electron from the molecules inside the crystal, and it loses energy, and also an electron is transmitted from this interaction. The thing is that there is a geometric relation between the how much energy the photon loses and what is the angle in which the the photon is scattered. And based on this principle, one can have a cone, so some region of where the gamma ray has arrived to the crystal. And of course, by having only one event, you cannot pinpoint what is the exact location of the source in the space. But having many events can lead to localize the source in the whole space around. So it's a 4 pi steradian imaging. So you can see, you can analyze the events from around the entire 3D space surrounding the crystal. The problem is that when you try to do this in the water, it becomes much more challenging because you cannot follow the usual assumptions that one is doing in the air. And one of these is that you know that the photon, so the gamma ray, has arrived without interacting with anything else to the crystal from the source. This is not happening in the water because it's the most probably the gamma rays would have interacted with the water before and would have undergo some Compton scattering outside of the detector. In order to solve this, instead of going through the theory-led approach. So using this equation and trying to solve the problem mathematically or even with statistics. We are doing a data-based approach. So we perform simulations and gather data with simulations, considering that there is water from the source, between the source and the detector, and then trying to reconstruct the image by using neural networks that, based on the known position of the source and the detector and what has been the signals that have been collected, reconstruct the image based on the data. So this is an ongoing work, and we have some very promising preliminary results. Another problem we are trying to deal with is Cherenkov radiation detection. Cherenkov radiation is happening when radioactivity is we have high radioactivity levels in the water, and especially beta decays, and it's mostly in the ultraviolet and the blue spectrum. And for this, we have built some special instruments that are able to detect this type of radiation. So besides some ultra sensitive UV cameras, we are using single photon cameras, which can give events based on the detection of a single photon. And so they're very, very sensitive devices, which we use in a very close proximity to the sources or to the suspected sources to see if we can detect some Cherenkov radiation. And this is important for scientists because there have been many speculations about the way that microorganisms are able to gather energy from the environment. And one of the assumptions is that they do this by exploiting the radioactivity, natural radioactivity in environments like in the hydrothermal vents. And detecting Cherenkov radioactivity in these environments would be very, very important. So now I would like to mention that the single photon imaging, it's very, very useful, not only for Cherenkov, but for detecting other kinds of, in other uses in underwater perception. If you have some active lighting, some LED lighting that is synchronized with these cameras, you can use them in order to see in very thick diffusers in very turbulent waters, because you can remove artificially backscatter, because you can only collect the photons that have a specific time difference between the transmission and the detection. And there are very useful applications which we are looking at with the use of this camera, which we have in our lab, and we are performing research in this direction. So on the practical aspect, we have seen some of the approaches, but I would like to talk about the Colombo volcano, which is the field in which we target to monitor with this technology. So Colombo volcano is located in the northeast of Santorini, about 7 nautical miles in the northeast, and it's an active underwater volcano, and it's been studied very thoroughly in the last 20, 30 years by national, international organizations. So even by NASA is involved in some of these projects. So the geologists and biologists and a very large multidisciplinary team is working on monitoring and understanding the activity of Colombo volcano. There have been multiple works with ROVs, AUVs, and other type of vehicles, and also by deploying sensors for studying the Colombo volcano. So in last year, we have performed some expeditions to Colombo volcano to test our algorithms and also to deploy some sensors and devices in order to continue monitoring the activity of the volcano. So you see here we used the Max Rover ROV from the Hellenic Marine Center of Research in order to put our instruments on top of the ROV and bring them to the volcano, which is at 500 meters depth, and also to deploy sensors for gathering data about the activity. So this video shows footage during one of the dives of this ROV in the hydrothermal vents of the Columbo volcano. And here we have the view is it's from different instruments, but also it considers the radioactivity measurements. So there are some numbers here you can see, which is about events per second detected by the detectors of radioactivity of gamma radiation. And we will see that when the ROV is bringing the detector very close to these chimneys, as they called, these vents, the number of events detected goes very, very high. So it's about 1,000 times more events detected in the proximity of these structures. So this means that there are some very there's a significant quantity of radioactive material that is emitted from these vents. So you will see here that it was about 1, 2, arrives 10, and then it will go very, very fast as we go closer to much higher numbers. Okay. So this is an indication that there is a natural source of radioactivity, and also we have taken samples. So the geologists have taken samples from these rocks that then they are currently studying them in order to have a correlation of also the activity in terms of gases that are emitted and the amount of radioactivity detected. We see already here that it has increased a lot. So I'll continue. So in the context of studying the Columbo volcano, as I mentioned before, we have installed various instruments which measure different physical and chemical quantities like oxygen levels, turbidity, salinity, temperature, and other similar quantities. But I would like to talk also for this type of sensor we have developed, which is an underwater monitoring system, an autonomous system that detects bubbles. So we have seen in the previous video that there is a gas emission from these vents, and there is a correlation between the rate in which the gases are emitted and the activity of the field. So we have built this standalone pan-tilt zoom camera systems that have their own electronics all embedded and can steer. You can steer them in order to focus a specific area, and they detect with a special software the bubble being emitted in order to be able to quantify what is the activity of the specific vent. So there have been some work on the detecting underwater bubbles in underwater environments from the gassing, but we had to build our own data set in order to train our models, both by using data from previous work and also from the internet, but also from other deployments we have done with our ROV in similar environments. So this is a hydrothermal field in the Milos, in the island of Milos, and we have created data set by annotating the bubbles in the images, and then we have performed similar tests in order to assess the accuracy in the detection, which was about 90% in these cases. And after this, after assessing the cameras in a approachable environment. We have deployed them in the environment of Colombo. This is the video of deployment, but okay, you will see here how they are placed inside the active area. So we don't have very much time, so we'll move a bit faster. And this is just to show you how we collected these cameras after 4 months. So the area is very active and very corrosive. So these cameras have we collect them at this form. So fortunately, they have been able to collect some data, which currently other we study them, but for a few days, because you see that after some days, material has already started to build on them, and this is an indication of how difficult it is to operate in these extreme environments. So I have a few minutes, but I would like, with the occasion of the previous videos, to just introduce what we are doing in the topic of underwater image enhancement. The images you have seen before are very green and very similar part quality, and it's as I mentioned at the beginning, very difficult to collect information from visual sensors in the sea because electromagnetic radiation is not it's attenuated very fastly in the water, and also there is problems with backscatter due to particles suspending in the water. So we exploit some models of how the light is transmitted in the water in order to solve with a data-based approach and reconstruct an image which is not affected by the water ideally. So we try to have images that would have been collected if water was not there, hypothetically. So you see here a video from a neural network we have trained based on this physical model that has corrected the images and in the colors of the images in order to be without being affected by water. And this is something we try to do also not only for red, green, blue cameras, which are the standard cameras, but also with multispectral cameras, because based on multispectral information, one can understand the composition of the scene. So with a proper data set, if one has the spectral signatures of the particular seabed composition, one can understand what type of material it's at each point. But for this, we use this type of cameras which are multispectral with a field array, and essentially you get information for each one of the spectral bands only at one every nth pixel. In this case, one every third pixel in rows and one every third in the columns. And the challenge is to build an image that has a high resolution for all the bands, so it has a full resolution for all the bands. And to do this, we based an approach on deep image prior, which is another method using neural networks to interpolate in an efficient way information that is missing. So don't have too much time to enter into details, but if you have some questions, I can cover this up in the question time. So essentially, we use neural networks to fill in the information in the missing pixels for each band. And this doesn't require any training. So it's a learning-free approach. And this is crucial because in the water, you cannot collect the ground truth. So we cannot remove the water and take the image without the water. And so in order to be able to reconstruct the multispectral image at high resolution, you have to do it without having learning any data, at least in the water. And this approach was thought with this idea in mind, that is a learning-free method, but which can still reach the precision in the reconstruction of learning-based approaches. Okay, and with this, I would like to thank you, and I'm ready to take any questions you have. Thank you very much.
Hello, thank you again for making this very interesting topic and a lot of, like the field trial cases, really fascinating to see something we won't be able to see by eyes initially. So let's see, currently we don't have any question from the chat. Anyone who have questions, please feel free to raise your hand and turn your micro on and then speak it out. Yeah, while we are waiting for this one, and I would like to ask, I have do some also robotic things in the field, and what's the most interesting when you do the field, field trial on the boat in the sea? What's the difference from what you are doing on the Earth? Whether everything does to bring a lot of uncertainties, or what? Do you have any kind of comments on this kind of, like field trial experiences?
You mean in practice, in practical
Yeah,
aspects?
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I can say because I have also done some work in the past in with humanoids and also ground robotics. It's much more stressful for sure because you know that if something goes wrong, it's very hard to recover the vehicle, and these vehicles have cost some hundreds of thousands of dollars in some cases. So the gliders cost a lot, and you don't know if you will see them again. And this is very stressful. So you have to be well prepared and have um, foreseen every possibility of something going wrong, if possible. And from another point of view, from logistics, is more complicated because you're on a boat. You don't have your lab with you, so you have to be well prepared and have all the equipment you would think that would be necessary with you. And in some case, you have to improvise and find solutions without having all your lab at your back. So yeah, from the deployment and the operations point of view, it's certainly more complicated and more stressful. And you have to be well prepared. That's the key, I think.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. I can imagine if you do the field trial, not field trial, I mean on the sea, on a few days, and you won't be able to do that properly. Great.
Exactly.
Still no question on the chat. Okay, so in this case, Nadine, uh, should we just call anyone else have any questions? If not, because I have to leave due to another meeting. Sorry, as a coordinator, I shouldn't say that, but uh, can I
No
just
problem.
transfer to you to host for the rest if anyone
Yes,
is
yes,
interesting?
yes,
Yeah.
of course, yeah.
Sorry, sorry for this.
No
Thank you.
worries,
Thank
Yeah.
you.
don't worry.
No
Okay.
Um,
problem. Thank you.
do you have any questions, please? Maybe I will have one question. You have done testing of the vehicle in a pool. So, and this testing to test the buoyancy. I was
Yes.
wondering how this is going to be different than real seawater because the uh,
Yes.
density in sweet water is different than salty water, and how you can test the buoyancy in that case. Get an
Yes.
accurate result. Yeah.
You are very right. This is a very good question. So essentially, yes, you prepare the vehicle to have a small difference as possible with what you will you experience when you go to the field, and still at the field you have to do some minor adjustments. So you try to have to be in some margin of I don't know 100 or less grammars of difference, and at the field you would test. Which is not very easy, but it's still you have to do it. And if it's not satisfactory, you have to open the vehicle, adjust the weights because there's some inner weights that you have to remove or add, and repeat the process until you are satisfied with the buoyancy. So it's a good question. It's something that you have to repeat at the field, but it
Excellent.
hopefully will be easier when you have done your work right at the lab.
Yeah, I can imagine. The more you do it, the better it gets.
Yes.
So thank you so much. If there isn't any more question, I will be concluding this talk. And thank you thank you so much for everybody who attended. And I will be posting the recording as well. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you, Nadine. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye bye. Thank you, everyone. Thanks. Marcus, if you can stay on the call, I want to
Yes.
thank you.
Yes. Stop sharing. Okay.
Everybody is leaving now. Thank you so much for giving the talk. Fascinating, every aspect of it. I wanted to say there were many people who wanted to attend and attended different link. So it seems like in
okay.
Eventbrite was the wrong link. That was the link for the next session, not this session. Next session.
I see. Yeah.
And therefore, but I try to rectify that as much as possible and bring them here. Nonetheless, I'm going to be sharing the recording. And if you are happy, we are happy also to share it publicly on YouTube. Yeah. So if you are happy for that, we're going to share it publicly. So thank you really so much. And I was wondering if there are a person who's interested in having direct contact with you. If you are okay, I can send them your email if you are okay with that.
Yes, sure. No problem. Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you,
Have a
Nadine.
nice day.
It was nice to see you after so long time.
No, it's just a pleasure, and hopefully we see you in person in the near future.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Bye bye. Thank you.